Hello, I'm Troy, and I'm going to be doing a walkthrough on this parameters make. This is based on code.org's parameters unit 7, but my class mixed it up a little bit. So we have a find an album year app here. We got two different options. I can either go random, and it shows me a random year, or I can pick a year. So let's say 20 or 2000, find an album. And it shows me an album from 2000. That's about it. So with this app though, we want to implement this. We want to make this work. So in the link below, you should be able to, there should be a link that's going to take you to a spot where you can build this yourself. To help you build, I have put some comments. That being said, there's a lot of work for you to do to make this all work. Part of what we're going to do is we're going to pull in data and filter and have filter lists. Do a couple different on events to be able to handle when things change. We're going to write a filter function, which we called find album here. And we're going to write an update screen function that uses that data that we have filtered. So let's get to it. First, I'm going to pull in the data. So I'm not sure if I've actually done this yet. We want to go to data and make sure we actually find the right data list. I'm currently using the Rolling Stones 100 or 500. So I'm going to go find Rolling Stones, import, and then I can look at the data. So keep in mind, I need to know the year because that's how I'm finding them. I want to be able to display the name, the year, and some album art. So I'm thinking I'm going to need this year list. I'm going to need the album list. And I'm going to need the album art list. Currently, I'm not using the artist, genre, subgenre, or others. So let's get to it. So in the code, I'm going to start out by pulling out the var command. On the right side, I'm going to use get column. And so the very first column from the Rolling Stones 500 that I'm going to tackle, let's see here. I'm going to do year. So I'm going to call it years. I like to use plural to help my brain remember that it's a list. I'm going to do the same for some of the other ones. So let's see, Rolling Stones 500. And then choose, let's see, year, album, and I want art last. So album. And then lastly, the art. I'm going to call it covers. I feel like that's better than, or makes more mental sense than arts. But you can call it what you want. So I did the Rolling Stone 500, and then over here, album art. I'm going to get rid of a couple of these extra blocks at this point. So I have the list that I need. Now I need filter lists. So this is essentially my more specific lists. So I'm going to type in a year. I'm going to hit find album. I then need the album and the album art. So for my filter list, I only need the album and the album art. So I'm going to make a filtered albums. And I'm going to put square brackets here to show that it's a list and that soon I will put it in it. And I'm going to have filtered art. Or how about covers, just to be consistent. Again, square brackets to show data will soon be there. Once at this point, I have my data, I have my sublists that aren't filled yet, but I'm about to. Now let's move on to step 2. On step 2, I want to start getting these buttons kind of at least halfway working. That's a user interface thing. So I'm going to create an on event. Inside the on event, I see I need to do a few different things. So I'm going to worry about that in a minute here. I'm going to kind of move the white blocks in there just to remind myself. So I'm seeing that for this one, I'm seeing album button. So when the album button is clicked, I'm going to do some stuff. I'm going to get at least that far for the random button. So I'm going to pull in a couple of these white blocks. put in the comment to remind myself, and then frankly get rid of the extras. So I need to get the year, filter, and update screen. So when I say get year, I'm seeing that I need to somehow get the text from this box. So I'm going to create a variable called wanted year where I can store whatever year I just get. I'm going to get the year from year input. Look at that descriptive naming. Now that I have the year, I can start trying to filter. I'm noticing that filter is a function down here. It's actually called find album. It's that kind of filter idea. So I'm going to say find album. I'm going to use the argument of wanted year. The wanted year will get sent down and put into goal year. Those are different names, but that's okay. So if I say over here right now, if I say 1999, when I hit find album, it's going to pull that 1999, send the 1999 down, and then put the 1999 down in this spot. At this point, I think I'm going to make this one at least a little work. So random button click. I think that's about all. Let's keep going, I guess. So I'm seeing get random year. So looking at the data ahead of time, I'm going to call this wanted year again. I believe our data goes from 1954 up until more recent. I believe it was 2022. I'm going to take a quick second peek at the data. So I see, 1967 might be my oldest. Oh, these aren't necessarily in order. Ooh, 57. I think I'd seen a 54. There's a 2. So I'm trying to go through quickly and look for a min and a max. I believe 1954 is the minimum. I'm going to check the max. I have 2011 as the max from my notes ahead of time. So I'm going to use it for right now, but you might want to just double check me. So notice on random, I'm not using what the user told me. I'm just making up a number, using a random number. That being said, once I get a random number, I do want to set the random number to this box. So again, that's a user interface thing. So I'm back to the element. I'm going to use a set text. This is going to be a little weird. Where we usually have the input, the year input, I'm actually going to output my wanted year. So what this will do is when I hit random, a number appears. I kind of figured this might be a nice thing of, instead of just having find album, if they hit random, it's kind of confusing. So I figured might as well have that kind of match up what they're doing. So up here I have get random year set on screen. I've done that. Now I need to do that filter again. Again, I didn't call it filter. I don't know why not, but I called it find album. I want to pass it the wanted year. In a minute here, I'm going to come back and worry about the update screens. But let's try to get the find album working first. I'm noticing I have this error. I'm looking down below right now just to double check. Did I spell it right? I didn't. I did filled album. I don't know what I'm thinking right now. Let's make that correction. I saw the triangle a minute ago. It said that it had not been declared yet. That essentially made me wonder if this name matched this name, because I thought I had said what find album was, even if I haven't written much code yet. So that's kind of how I knew to double check that. But now let's make find album actually work. One of the first things we want to do when we're doing a filter function is we want to make sure that our filtered lists are still empty. This kind of has to do with when we run. We want like 1971 data until we don't. We want to make sure we empty the list so we're ready for 1991 data. So I'm going to pull over at x equals blank. Notice there is no var. I'm not making a new variable, but I'm updating the filtered Ooh, what are my two filtered albums and filtered covers? I'm updating their values to square brackets, which is essentially, it's going to be a list, but there's no data yet. So filtered covers, square brackets. So I've made sure that my two filtered things are empty. Now I need to loop through the data, checking something. So I'm going to loop through the data. Notice here, I'm about to check if the year is what I want. And then if it is what I want, I'm going to add the data to my filtered lists. So to check if the year is what well, before I go any farther, I better make sure my loops go in the right length. So I start at 0. I want to check every piece of data. And so I'm looking up here, I see years, albums, covers are the big data lists. So I'm going to go years dot length. That should make sure I check all the albums. Once I'm going through, if the year is what I want, so I need to see if this goal year value they passed to me, the parameter value, matches my current data piece. So I'm going to go goal year equals years spot I. So I'm essentially saying, let's say you say 1991. Is spot 0 in our list a 1991? Is spot 2 in our list a 1991? Spot 3, spot 4, etc. And that's where a computer is real great. It does it all for us versus me having to say that 500 more times. Once I've found the right year, I want to add it to my filtered list. So I'm going back to our variables. I'm looking for a append item. This will allow me to essentially say my filtered albums list should get the data from albums spot I. That same spot we just had the right year. Well, we want to grab that album. And same for the cover. Make sure I don't have quotes there because I'm not defining a value. I'm more calling a variable. So I add the two values to a list. This is kind of a good spot just to pause for a second and let's test real quick. So when I run and hit random year, see how it paused right here? So real quick, let's just see. If I go year, or if I go goal year, does it match my user interface? So I see 1966 here and 1966 here. Woohoo! I guess I'm curious, what is the album? So I'm going to go filtered albums. I see nothing's in there. When I hit step in, I'll go over just that one step, and I see pet sounds was just added. Ooh, I don't really know if that's a 1966 album. Testing my knowledge. I'm going to hit continue, so it jumped ahead. Notice at this point, it's adding revolver. Just out of curiosity, notice I'm only on I2. Let's go continue. Ooh, I jumped all the way to I8 just there. Step in, added blonde on blonde. Interesting. So one way to just check, I'm working on 1966 again. So I can go in my data table. 1966, pet sounds, revolver. I think a little bit farther down, blonde on blonde. Looks like I'm getting good data. So I'm going to keep pushing forward. So at this point, I'm going to remove the pause, hit continue. Code will just finish, and that's it. Now we want to get the update screen working. One of the things you'll notice in this data is not every year has data. There's some years where there just wasn't amazing music, apparently. So the first thing I want to do is check if my filtered list actually got data. So what I'm going to do here is essentially check either one of these should be the same size, see if their length is bigger than 0. So filtered albums dot length, is it bigger than 0? If so, I'm going to do a bunch of things. If it's not bigger than 0, that tells me that I have a different issue. I probably want to send some sort of error message or just give them a heads up. But if it's bigger than 0, I'm going to pick a random album from this year. So I'm going to call it random index. I'm going to make it a random number between my smallest spot on my list, 0, and my biggest spot on my list. The temptation is right here to use filtered albums dot length. That is almost right, but slightly not. The challenge is length is going to be one too big, and we want to make sure we don't go one extra out of our list. That's why when we did our for loop up here, we did less than length instead of less than or equal to. So I'm actually going filtered length -1 to make sure my indexes are within my list length. Now that I've picked a random spot, I want to use it to display some stuff. So when I hear display, that makes me think like set stuff on my user interface. I'm seeing I'm going to display some text, so I'm going to grab a set text. I also see I'm going to display some album art. So I'm going to grab a set property. Set properties are just have more abilities. You actually could use a set property here if you really wanted to. I'm seeing this is year output. So I'm going to look for year output. And then I need to say the text I'm about to show. I see a couple examples here. You should listen to the damage from 1981. That makes me think that this right here is the album. You should listen to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy from 2010. So what I'm seeing here is I'm just going to copy this text down if code.org will let me. Sometimes the code.org selection is a little finicky. So let's see here. So you should listen to damage. So one of the things I like to do is I'm going to highlight the word I want to replace and go quote, quote, and kind of click over inside and go plus, plus. And then right here, I'm going to put a variable. And so what I'm seeing is I want to go filtered albums spot random index. So I want to display a random album out of my filtered list. I must admit, this is going to get long and ugly, but that's where we're at. I also want to display a year. Notice for the year, it is at the end, so I just deleted it and I'm adding it onto the end. I didn't have a filtered year list, did I? Oh, but I see it was passed as a parameter. So down here, in the last spot, plus year. Let's see why it's giving me an error. It's getting mad about my brackets, it looks like. It looks like I used a square bracket and a curly bracket. I just got mixed up. They should both be square brackets. So you should listen to filter album random index from year. Notice how year has no quotes because it's a variable being pulled down from up here. Ooh, I have a different issue. We'll worry about that in a sec. Okay, let's do the album image. So I'm going to go album image. Let's see, find it in here. It is going to be an image. And then notice it gives you a little URL. I'm actually just going to delete all that and say filtered covers spot that same random index. Cool. Okay, this is close enough where I should be able to run it. I might get some errors. Oh no, I'm not seeing anything. Well, this is what happened. The error I saw a moment ago. Update screen is defined but not called in your program. This is making me suspect that update screen year, I just never told it to do it up in the on events. So let's look back up in the on events. Yep, there's find album. Well, where's update screen? So I'm going to add update screen right here. And again, I'm going to give it the wanted year. The wanted year that I had pulled from a drop or from the text box in this case, or the update screen that I had generated, or the random year I had updated here. So update screen with the wanted year. And notice on this one, the wanted year with random. So let's try one more time. So run random. Hey, something's happening. Okay, the years match. I don't know my music that great, but hey, Temptation, the best. Okay, maybe. Okay, okay. I'm feeling reasonable. Where's my picture? Notice right now there's just no picture. Well, one of the tricks we kind of did, and I spotted this a minute ago, is this hide image spot. When I reset, I kind of see it faded right here. I'm actually wondering, do I just need to add an extra set property where I make sure it is currently visible? So what that means is in the first menu, so I need to make sure I'm talking about an album image. I need to look for visible or hidden, sorry. I want it not to be hidden. I want hidden to be false. Don't hide. So when I hit random, there it goes. Hey, this looks awesome. Well, I could do this for a little bit, but eventually I'm going to find a year that doesn't have data. Notice these are different issues. This is that the code.org data table has a bad URL for an image. But eventually you'll find a year that just doesn't have data. So I want to display a message here that essentially says couldn't find. I guess one example would be if I go 2020, which is outside of our range. Notice down here, I'm kind of getting 0, nothing changed. It's kind of acting a little funny. So I'm going to set property or set text and display an error message. This is going to go in that year output like before. And on this one, I must admit, I think my error message is a little easier. I don't have to use variables or anything. I just need to say no outputs found, try a different year. So I'm going to copy all of that and paste it. And then it says hide image. So again, I'm going to go find that set property, and it's going to look very similar. So it was the album image. It's the hidden property. Then I want to hide it. So hidden true. Let's try it now. So run 2020. Oh yeah, 220 would probably also. So random works, but when I go 2020, yeah, some random year, no albums, try a different year. Cool. So I think at this point, when I run, let's see, random's working. I'm going to reset run just to start, try different use cases. What happens if I start by looking for a year first? I'm going to use some years that I think do, 2009 has no, okay. Let's see, trying to use some data where, yep, okay. I think that's an album from 2008. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. In summary, we started out with pulling in the data we needed. We made sure the data was connected to the app already. We created the filter list that we thought were this more specific data we wanted for any given year. And then we worked through and we kind of worked on, could we set up the on events for the different actions? One action had to do with just them typing in a year and us using it. The other action had the idea of the user generating we generated a random number for the user. Once we had done one of those, we created a find album or a filter function where essentially we said find the album for a given year. And so we had to make sure our lists were emptied of old data. We went through all the data, specifically looking for the year in question. When we found it, we added that album and cover to our special filtered lists. Then lastly, we tried to display stuff. If our filtered list had at least one thing in it, we picked a random spot, displayed some text, displayed the image. If the list had no data, then we displayed a little error message and hid the image, just because the image would render funny. Thank you for taking time to watch this. I hope this helps you with your project. Good luck learning parameters in code.org's Comp Sci Principles, Unit 7.